The Shooting Range. In this episode, Pages of History, the Czechoslovakian Tank Building School, Triathlon, Rank 4 Medium Tanks, and Metal Beasts, the Arrogant Japanese Armored Vehicle. Fighting tanks is no easy task, so most machines created for it have a huge gun, sophisticated missiles, and/or heavy armor. There is, however, another approach, and the new Japanese Type 87 RCV is a perfect showcase of it. Its armament includes a 25mm autocannon with elevation angles between -10 and +45 degrees, as well as a coaxial machine gun. For auxiliary equipment, it has smoke launchers and a night vision device. The engine compartment is situated in the rear part of the machine, hidden by some armor plates. The crew has 5 people. The driver and the machine gunner sit in the front, the gunner and the commander in the turret, and the loader next to the engine. So, what is so special about its anti-tank approach? It involves an amazing level of mobility and a surprisingly strong 25mm autocannon. The latter has APFSDS darts you might have heard about before. These darts have enough penetration rate to pierce the side of any medium tank or MBT, while lighter targets like anti-air and even IFVs can't even survive a volley in the front. Only the heaviest opponents can become a stumbling block, but hardly a big issue. When you meet one, you can't destroy it right away. Damage its barrel and road wheels, mark it with active scouting, and switch to the next victim. Before they've finished the repairs, you'll be far across the map, and your allies will have had a great time poking them full of holes. So, mobility and firepower make for a fun, aggressive vehicle, but it's enhanced even more by its high aiming speed. With a surprise attack, you'll be able to win against the odds facing multiple enemies. You just need to see them first. The only combat disadvantage here is the missing stabilizer. With a high rate of fire, you really don't need it, but still, aiming on the go is far from comfortable. And, of course, remember how thin the Type 87's armor is. You do have a crew of 5, which increases your survivability, but it's only true as long as the enemy's rounds go through without being triggered. A large caliber machine gun, however, might become your arch nemesis. Lights out. Another thing to keep in mind is checking the skies every once in a while. Towards the middle of the battle, enemy aircraft will spawn there, and you're just a juicy little frag for them. However, this Japanese meanie has a surprise for enemy pilots as well. Its gun can point 45 degrees upwards. Not enough to cover the whole team, of course, but more than enough to turn into an impromptu anti-air gun, unless you miss the attack. Imagine you're in the 1930s, and you want some tanks. Who do you go to? Well, the French and the British are obvious leaders, and the Americans might have something good. But what about tiny Czechoslovakia? Back then, during the interwar period, it had its own tank-building school. And what a school it was! Czechoslovakia had 2 large companies designing and building tanks, Škoda and ČKD. They were direct competitors, which meant an incredibly fast level of progress for armored vehicles. Škoda was the first one to launch a highly successful model with its light tank named LT Vzor 35. It had pneumatic controls and a planetary gearbox with full reverse. Germans tried to create a similar design too, but to no avail. The Czechoslovakian engineers had to spend some time polishing the design, but in the end, it proved that they could compete with the world leaders. Meanwhile, the ČKD competitors were busy too. Having lost the home battle, they targeted the export market. And boy, did it deliver. ČKD tanks had an outstanding level of quality for a low price, and the firm was ready to make customized models for its clients. The terms they offered were a tank buyer's dream. Iran and Peru were among early adopters, while Sweden and Switzerland went so far as to license a local production. And that's how Czechoslovakia became the world's second top exporter of armored vehicles, only losing to Britain. While ČKD was getting through its foreign orders, the Czechoslovak army announced they needed a new light tank. The LT Vzor 35 still had a lot of its flaws, so its production was halted. And that's when the ČKD proposed a modification of their export model. The prototype had managed to drive 7,000 kilometers with no big issues. Satisfied with this result, the army accepted the LT Vzor 38 into service almost immediately. But as soon as its mass production started, the country was occupied by the Germans. The Germans appreciated the effort. Even the LT Vzor 35 looked much more promising than the German Panzer II, while the LT Vzor 38 could be compared to early Panzer III tanks. Since the production of the latter was having issues, the Czechoslovakian tanks turned up right on time. Unlike other trophy vehicles, these were renamed in the German style: the Panzer 35T and the 38T. They liked the 38 so much they established their own production of it, modernized it later, and used its chassis throughout the entire war. Summing up, having great engineers is great, but not always enough, unfortunately. Yes, Czechoslovakia supplied Iran, Romania, Peru, Switzerland, Sweden, Hungary, and Ethiopia with its armor, but they couldn't defend themselves against the German occupation. After the war, the communists cut down the export and the country had to produce Soviet vehicles instead. And that's how the Czechoslovakian school became a thing of the past. Today we're going to test the most versatile Rank 4 machines, medium tanks with battle ratings between 6.3 and 6.7. Please welcome the American M26 Pershing, the Soviet T-44, the British Charioteer Mark 7, the Japanese ST-A3. Italy is represented by another Pershing modification A1, while the AMX M4 will compete for France. As is tradition, the first stage will check the mobility of our vehicles. Crews line up at the line. Go! The machines shoot off, and the clear leaders are the British and the French tanks, closely followed by the STA and the T-44. The Pershings are lagging a little. The desert only increases the gap between the contestants. The marsh makes the charioteer give way to the French tank, but the race isn't over yet. And here's the finish line. The asphalted downhill road allows the tanks to chase their maximum speeds. The British tank catches up with the AMX and wins! The AMX comes second. Then comes the Soviet tank. It beat the Japanese crew in the final part of the race. The fifth place goes to the American, and finally, the Italian Pershing comes last. Looks like its bigger mass played its role. Now let's check the frontal armor on our contestants. We'll use an American 90mm gun with APC-BC rounds shooting from 500 meters away. The charioteer exposes its front first and leaves the round. Its armor certainly needs help with this kind of shell. Time to check the Japanese machine. Its gun mantlet and turret sides can sometimes handle the hit, and the transmission in the front increases its chances, but overall it can't show a much better performance. Okay, who's next? The Pershings. They have a lot of vulnerabilities. The lower glacis sides, the bottom of the upper glacis, the machine gun nest, the driver and the machine gunner's hatches, the turret ring, and the area above the mantlet. But the complicated shape of their cast armor makes aiming hard. The French tank feels much more confident here. Its only vulnerable area on the hull is the frontal plate seam, with the oscillating turret's sophisticated mechanism increasing its chances. And the winner of this stage is the Soviet tank. The only vulnerabilities it has are the flat areas on the turret cheeks and the gun mantlet, as well as the commander's cupola. Finally, the shooting part. We've prepared 2 Henschel King Tigers for each of our contenders, sitting at a distance of 200 meters. One of them will expose its side, while the other will face the attack with its front. To make the comparison more objective, we've removed all ammunition from our targets. The T-44 Pershings and the STA-3 destroy their first Tigers with the very first shot, all thanks to their APC-BC rounds. The French and the British tanks need 2 shots, but they too switched to the harder target. Thanks to the autoloader and Heat FS rounds, the Japanese crew destroys the second tank and finishes the trial. 2 targets destroyed in 3 shots and a little more than 12 seconds. The Brit needs 19 seconds. Its APDS can penetrate the upper glacis of the Tiger. Other contestants, though, need more time to pick their way through the turret with their APDS and APCR rounds. Time to sum up. The tanks we tested today are all compromise engineering solutions with small trade-offs. Some have better armor, others improved mobility, reload rate, or ammo choice. It's simply too long a list to go deeply into here, which is why we decided to give awards to all 6 tanks. So, the bronze goes to the British Charioteer for its excellent mobility and strong APDS rounds, and to the 2 Pershings for versatility. The silver goes to the Soviet T-44 for its strong armor, and to the Japanese STA-3 for its autoloader and ammo variety. And the winner today, by a tiny margin, is the French AMX for an overall outstanding performance. Phew. Now that we're all out of awards, it's time to answer some of the questions you ask us in the comments. The first question was sent by a player called Luke M. Is there even a plane with non-self-sealing fuel tanks? Hello there, Luke. In fact, there are many. The Japanese A6M, for instance. Random D writes, Why did bombers stop having defensive turrets past World War II? Hi there. Well, they didn't, strictly speaking. There's a number of post-World War II bombers with defensive turrets, but they lost their appeal very quickly since missiles soon became the main anti-air weapon, and you can't do much against them no matter the caliber of your machine gun. Another question comes from Quag Toilet. How to shoot the main cannon from the binoculars/commander sights? Hello there. The commander's sight is pretty simple to set up. Just bind a key in Controls, Ground Vehicles, Weaponry, Commander Fire Control. You can't shoot using your binoculars though. Thankfully, there's a way to use the elevated point of view. You might find helpful if you shoot in an arched trajectory. Open your binoculars, press and hold the fire button. That will pull the round aiming reticle towards the binocular's aim continuously, which means you can aim at an enemy you can't see with a regular sight. When you need to shoot, just switch back to the gunner's sight, and since you're still holding the fire button, the round will be sent where it needs to be, immediately. Diego de Riviera Byrne asks, my question is about the Type 93 Japanese SPAA. How its SAM works? IR? Radio guided? Hi Diego. The Type 93 uses infrared homing missiles. And the last comment for today was written by Nighthawk. If the Maus is the heaviest heavy tank in the game, with a weight of 188 tons, what is the lightest heavy tank in the game? Hi there. Without going too deeply into different notions of tank classifications that nations had throughout the last 100 years, the lightest heavy is the Japanese Type 95 Rogo, only 25.5 tons. That's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. And why would you? Check your plane's fuel tanks and seal them manually if you need, so they won't spill a drop. Don't forget to leave a like, because you do. Share your thoughts and comments, and we'll see you next week.